overwhelming pride in this team and everything we've done to get here. I couldn't really have anything better to say about this group of people.
It's the 20th of October 2020, and we're in Littleton, Colorado, in the United States. Here, a group of NASA scientists and engineers is celebrating a milestone for space exploration and the global understanding of the solar system. The spacecraft OSIRIS-REx has just succeeded in collecting a sample of rocks and dust from Bennu, a near-Earth asteroid.
OREX MSA on OREX Op. Sample collection is complete and the back-away burn has executed.
OSIRIS-REx was the first United States mission to collect a sample from an asteroid, successfully returning it to Earth in September 2023. We sometimes hear about asteroids in the news as threatening space rocks heading towards Earth. But asteroids are actually much more than that. They're rocky, airless celestial objects orbiting the Sun, leftover debris from the early formation of our solar system. Their composition can tell us a lot about our origins, and that's why OSIRIS-REx was so important. On top of that, NASA's mission also played a pivotal role in another almost sci-fi-like ambition, asteroid mining. It proved that it's possible to approach an asteroid, collect material from its surface, and bring it back to Earth. But what exactly is asteroid mining? Welcome to Euronews Tech Talks, the podcast that explores the digital, technological, and scientific landscape shaping Europe. I'm your host, James Thomas. I know you're used to Jeremy Wilkes' voice when it comes to space, but this time you'll have to make do with me. Today we wrap up our journey into the world of space and energy by delving into the topic of space mining. Once again, our aim is to bring some clarity to this increasingly discussed subject, speaking with space experts from different backgrounds. We'll try to understand what space mining is, how it differs from asteroid mining, how close we are to making it a reality, and if and why we actually need this practice. As always, our goal isn't to create hype, but to understand where the enthusiasm comes from and whether it's justified. So, if you're ready, grab a cup of tea and let's begin.
Space mining is a term that's been coined to describe extracting raw materials from objects in space, like the moon or asteroids.
This is Ian Crawford, Professor of Planetary Science at Birkbeck College, University of London in the UK. The moon and asteroids are two particularly popular targets for space mining. They both contain valuable resources, such as critical raw materials, and are more accessible than other celestial bodies. However, moon mining and asteroid mining are normally related to two very different forms of space mining.
It's quite important to differentiate between the communities who wish to mine things in space, use in space, and those who wish to mine things in space to sell on the Earth. So, in terms of utilizing resources on the moon to help us continue to explore the moon, water is probably the most important resource. And water probably does exist on the moon in the form of ice, frozen into permanently shadowed craters at the lunar poles. So if, for example, you were going to build a moon base, it would be very useful to have a local source of water. Water is a very useful material. Obviously, we need water to survive. But equally, water can be broken down into its constituents, oxygen and hydrogen. And we need the oxygen as well to survive. But combining oxygen with hydrogen also makes a powerful rocket fuel, which could be useful. So water is a very useful material, but obviously it's quite a heavy one. I mean, a cubic meter of water weighs a ton. So lifting many tons of water from the Earth to the moon would be an expensive thing to do. So much better if the moon has its own source of water. But this is an example of mining water on the moon for use on the moon.
The first group of people Ian refers to are those looking for ways to mine resources on the moon to sustain a permanent human presence on its surface and to further advance space exploration. But there's also another group of people interested in space mining.
Now, for the other community that thinks there are things in space that are worth mining and selling, they are mostly focused on the asteroids. They're mostly focused on a class of asteroids which are made mostly of iron. And these iron asteroids are potentially very valuable because obviously we wouldn't mine asteroids for iron either because the Earth has plenty of iron. But the natural processes that have concentrated iron in iron asteroids have also concentrated nickel, cobalt, and a whole range of the so-called siderophile iron-loving elements like platinum, gold, and a slew of rhodium, a whole slew of palladium, a whole slew of really very expensive elements. So there are companies that argue that if we were to mine these so-called platinum group elements from iron asteroids, this would be worth a lot. And so there are companies that are startup companies. I mean, they haven't really achieved anything yet, but startup companies that are aiming to do this.
The second group of people interested in space mining projects are those who want to mine asteroids and bring the resources back to Earth. These two areas of space mining have completely different goals, but they do share some similarities. First, like space-based solar power, they're still just projects and nothing more at this stage. Second, they face a lot of challenges. For instance, on the moon, finding and extracting water isn't as easy as you might expect.
The water, if it exists, there's only one place on the moon where water is possible, and that's as ice in permanently shadowed craters. And water is possible there because in crater floors that never see the sun, it's always extremely cold, like minus 230 odd degrees Celsius, and there's no direct sunlight. So, of course, that would be a very difficult place to operate with no solar power and extremely low temperatures. And no one has really designed a feasible mechanism yet for extracting water from permanently shadowed craters on the moon because it was such a difficult environment. So when the time comes to think about it, this will be the tension. Is it really going to be cheaper to build a mining operation in a permanently shadowed crater on the moon with all the infrastructure that you'd have to build on the moon? Or maybe it might, after all, just be cheaper to launch it with giant rockets from the Earth.
The moon is not only an interesting destination for water, but also for other common chemical elements that might be found in asteroids, such as iron, aluminium, and titanium. So, in this case, is it easier to mine on the moon or on asteroids?
For the asteroids, there are a whole string of technical issues. I mean, the advantage of the asteroids is they are very small. So they don't have any gravity of their own, or not much. So the energy required to get materials off an asteroid is much less than it is to get it off the moon. So that's an advantage for asteroids. On the other hand, the asteroids are not as close as the moon. There are some asteroids that come relatively close to the Earth. They're all almost always still much further away from the moon. But they're also on quite eccentric orbits. So a given asteroid might be relatively close to the Earth 1 year, and then you might have to wait 20 years or so or before it's as close to the Earth again. So this could be a disadvantage. Whereas the moon, we know where it is, and it's always 380,000 kilometers away, and it's not going to change. So that's an advantage of the moon has over asteroids. But then the asteroids have concentrated some elements more than the moon, like the platinum group elements, for example. The moon has probably concentrated some elements more than asteroids, like the rare earth elements. So again, there'd be a balance as to what materials you were really seeking. And that this would dictate whether you tried to obtain them from the moon or asteroids.
As Ian Crawford explained, space mining is a complex endeavour, both for the in situ use of extracted resources and for their exploitation on Earth. Despite these technical and economic challenges, space mining is gaining momentum among private companies and international organisations. In September 2025, the European Commission published its Foresight report, highlighting how growing competition for critical raw materials could drive Europe to explore new solutions like space mining, starting with the moon. But as we know from our old episodes on lithium, mining is a controversial practice, one that raises questions, concerns, and protests. So, let's try to address some of these, starting with the biggest one. Is space mining ethically correct?
It depends.
This is Pierfrancesco Biasetti, researcher at the Leibniz Institute for Zoo and Wildlife Research in Germany and teacher at the summer school in space ethics organized by the University of Padua, Italy.
Some philosophers and ethicists and scientists and engineers have analyzed this kind of question. And one aspect that emerges from their analysis is the recognition that by drawing on extraterrestrial resources, we could make our society wealthier and more efficient, okay? And this would lead to a higher quality of life and greater individual well-being. We might even help the environment on our planet by ending certain extractive activities here by using space mining. So if we follow this line of reasoning, space mining seems to be legitimate from an ethical standpoint. And I believe that there is a further argument that we can use to strengthen this conclusion. We cannot really think of space exploration without using extraterrestrial resources. So what we have here on Earth may be good enough to kick a space exploration, but not to sustain it. But of course, as always in ethics, the devil is in the details, okay? Even if you agree that using resources beyond Earth can be ethically justified, this has still to be done responsibly. And what this means, of course, can be rather complicated, okay, to figure out. And we need to analyze in this sense each case individually. What kinds of resources are we talking about? Or how important are these resources? How scarce are they on Earth? How will we use these resources and how will they be extracted and by whom, okay? And also more importantly, how will the cost and benefits be shared across different people and even generation?
In addition to the questions raised by Biasetti, there are other key aspects that also need to be considered. This is Erik Persson, Associate Professor of Philosophy at Lund University in Sweden.
If we talk about mining on a planet or a moon that may potentially have life, then it becomes, of course, complicated because then it's a matter of how will this impact eventual life on this world. And that can be an issue both for Earth scientists who want to study this world in its pristine stage and want to look for life there. Depending on what kind of life it is, it can also be an ethical problem if it impacts an indigenous life. It could be worth it in some cases when we talk about some very rare metals, for instance. And that could be potentially a good thing if it means that we can avoid some of the problems with mining that we have on Earth. And some claim that this would be a good thing, while others point out that on Earth, when we find a new source of a resource, it usually does not mean that we use less of this resource from another source. If we open up a new mine on Earth, it doesn't mean that we close another mine. It could mean a boom for the Earth economy, but it would probably also mean an increased gap between those who have and those who have not. Because you need to have quite a lot of resources to open up mining in space.
We know you probably didn't start listening to Euronews Tech Talks for a philosophy class. But we believe that it's important to understand what's at stake to avoid the mistakes we've made on Earth as we expand into the rest of the solar system. If you got lost, here's a short summary. On the one hand, space mining for in-situ exploitation could benefit space exploration, while space mining for ex-situ exploitation could potentially help reduce the negative environmental and social impact of mining on Earth. On the other hand, space mining can pose a threat to life on other celestial bodies and to research conducted on them, and we can't know whether mining in space would actually reduce mining on Earth. These are complex questions, puzzling hypotheses and endless doubts. To address them, another field comes into play: law. What place does space mining have in the legal sphere?
It's definitely something that's being discussed in a lot of different circles, and academic circles and legal circles, through the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs and Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, and in individual governments, in individual countries.
You've just heard from Jill Stuart, an academic based at the London School of Economics in the UK and an expert in the politics, ethics and law of outer space exploration and exploitation.
What we already have in place, I think, is a good starting point. So the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 says that no nation state may lay claim to celestial territory. So it bans the ownership of anything in space. Having said that, there are other areas of the human realm, such as the high seas and Antarctica, where they are neutral territory, but we do allow for the extraction of some resources. So I think we're going to see people talking about how we can continue to respect the Outer Space Treaty and the principles and norms that it establishes around neutrality and fairness of access, while still allowing for some level of resource extraction as it becomes technologically more feasible.
The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 is a multilateral agreement at the core of international space law. It was signed during the Cold War, at a time when the Soviet Union and the United States were competing to establish technological dominance in space. The treaty obliges its parties to use outer space exclusively for peaceful purposes. On top of this international legal framework, some countries, such as Luxembourg, have adopted national regulations for resource use in space.
In addition to Luxembourg, who passed a law in 2017 saying that companies with Luxembourg's registration can extract resources from outer space, they were actually preceded by the Commercial Space Act of 2015 from the United States. And Japan has also passed similar legislation saying that Japanese companies can extract resources. So these are all individual countries saying that their companies can do so. It's interesting because they mostly include a clause that says this can be done within the legal responsibilities that the country adheres to from the Outer Space Treaty. So it's not really clear how exactly that's going to work. In addition, though, we also have discussions around, for example, the Artemis Accords, which were drafted by the United States, which is not a binding law. It's an agreement. So it's saying other countries might want to sign up to this. And one of the things that it talks about is the extraction of resources on the moon. So it's an interesting time because there's definitely actions being taken to try and open up the legality of resource extraction, but it's not actually entirely clear how that's going to work in practice.
Basically, from a legal point of view, it's not clear how space resources will be managed. However, through its law on the exploration and use of space resources of 2017, Luxembourg positioned itself firmly on the map. One of the direct initiatives stemming from that law was the creation of ESRIC, the European Space Resources Innovation Centre, a project from the Luxembourg Space Agency and the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology, with the strategic partnership of the ESA.
We have research projects looking at how you can extract oxygen from the lunar regolith, which is the dust that coats the surface of the moon. We go from understanding the resources through to handling, extracting oxygen from that regolith, purifying a product, reusing waste materials in 3D printing. So we really look at the whole system, the whole process, to work out how we can best and most sustainably use the resources of space to support these future long-duration missions.
This is Kathryn Halder, Director of ESRIC. Overall, the centre conducts research on space resources and, when it comes to space mining, focuses on the extraction of materials for space exploration. In addition to research, ESRIC also supports commercial activities in the field of space resources, helping them conduct their business.
We run a business incubator program, the startup support program, which we run with in partnership with the European Space Agency. And that call is, we open calls once or twice a year to space resources startups from around the world. And they can come into our program to be supported to develop their business. And what we see through that program is this emerging domain. It's a really dynamic sector in space resources. So in Europe, we started behind, but actually we're really catching up. And there's a lot of really exciting companies out there with really interesting business models for the future space resources market.
But how is ESRIC addressing the ethical debate?
Sustainability with respect to resources, there's 3 ways that we can use the word sustainable when it comes to space resources. So one is sustainable in the way that we are using the resources of space to make space travel, space exploration more sustainable, in that we don't have to take everything with us. There's the concept of economic sustainability as well, as how these companies that we support, that we're nurturing through the incubator program, how they can become economically sustainable. And then there's sustainability in terms of the resources themselves and the footprints that we leave. In terms of the latter of those 3, so we have a large program funded by the FNR, which is the Luxembourg National Funding Agency, National Research Fund. So here we look at concepts of recycling, on lunar surface recycling, for example, on using all waste streams so they have some purpose, so we don't produce waste when we are extracting resources. And we look at our footprint, how we can minimize footprint and so on.
Space mining is still a project, an ambitious one that raises questions but also generates enthusiasm. As you've probably gathered, despite the great hype around it, the technology isn't ready yet, and neither is the law. There are plans, there are advancements, there's research, and there are emerging economic activities. And, according to Ian Crawford, this delay could be seen as an opportunity rather than a disadvantage.
The technology is improving and it will become possible. I'm certain it will become possible in the next few decades. I think it has to be taken seriously and especially the regulation of it has to be taken seriously because it will become possible. On the other hand, I think there is a window. I think there's a window of opportunity to try and let the international diplomats try and come up with some globally acceptable way of regulating this activity, because there is time. I don't think the technology is going to be capable to be really mining asteroids or the moon at any really significant level for probably 20 or 30 years. So there is a window of opportunity to try and get our act together and develop an international regime that can deal with the utilization of space resources according to internationally agreed principles.
That's all for today's episode of Euronews Tech Talks. We hope you enjoyed our journey into the world of space and energy. In our next episode, we'll be flying to Oslo, Norway for a Q&A on another fascinating topic, robotics. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, James Thomas. This series was created by Marta Rodriguez Martinez. This episode was written and produced by Alice Carnevale. Theme music is by Leo Lebrun. Sound editing and sound mixing is by Joanne Breton. Our editor-in-chief is Niaz Samadizada. If you aren't already, you can listen to this series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on the Euronews YouTube channel. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving us a positive review and, of course, sharing it. Thanks for listening.